Hi everyone, I'm Lauren, and today I'm gonna go over what I've been reading the past few weeks. I wish I got into doing one of these earlier because there's a lot of books here. If I counted correctly, there's 13 books. All of these books that I read for the A to Z reading challenge. I have a video for that, so hopefully I remember to put a link or something like that to that. There's only 5 days, I think, left in the month, so I don't think I will finish all of them before the end of the month. But I'll see how many more I can do, and then I'll make a video for the rest of them. I guess it'd be nice to do weekly videos instead of doing one. This is for a few weeks instead of just one. So yeah, that's why I'll be lengthy. Anyway, let's just start from the top, from what I read first and then to what I read last, I guess. So the first one I have to talk about is Ronin Kinchin, Volume 3 by, where is it? By Nobuhiro Watsuki. This is a series about this, like, wandering, I don't know, I think he's like a Ronin or something, which is like a type of swordsman, essentially, and he has this past that he doesn't want to talk about, and trouble happens in Japan, and he tries to keep the peace, but also tries not to get back into his like negative tendencies of his past or something like that. I don't know how to explain that, but it's a very action-packed shonen manga with a little bit of humor here and there, and I think it's fine so far. This is the third one, and I thought the first two were also kind of fine. I'm not hyper sure if I want to continue too much in the series, because there's not a whole lot that is wowing me too much. I do have one more volume, so I'll probably read that before I have like a yeah or no, I won't continue. But it was fine. Like, I gave it a 3-star, and yeah, there wasn't anything particularly that I was impressed by, but there wasn't anything that I particularly hated either. It was fine. The next one I read was Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is a collection of science fiction short stories. I guess some of them might be novellas or novelettes or whatever, but they range in length and they range in different topics. But they're all kind of like what if sci-fi type stories. And normally I don't like short stories, but I actually liked a few of these in here. And the ones that I liked the least were the shortest ones, so they just didn't have enough time to flesh out for me. And so it was less like I hate this, and was more just like this could have been more interesting if it was fleshed out more, perhaps. I don't remember the names of them because, like, I don't have my own copy. I borrowed it. But there was one about these AI pets that was really interesting, and then there was the other one that was really interesting off the top of my head was this one where people could talk to their parallel world self or something like that through this computer type thing. And both of them were pretty interesting, and kind of the rare case where like it got me thinking, but not in a sense like this is dumb. It's like like that's an interesting idea kind of thing. I didn't like some of the shorter ones, like the title short story Exhalation. It was a bit short. It was kind of weird, I guess. A lot of the stories were a little on the weird side, but they weren't overly so. They were more interesting weird than like how much drugs did this guy take. So I usually really don't like these short story collections because or short story anthologies because I don't like most of them, and usually the one that I like the most is like, it's fine. But this was actually a really good collection, and I actually really enjoyed some of them. So I gave it a 4-star rating. I'm definitely going to check out other things that the author has written, although unfortunately they only have one other short story collection, and then they don't have any full-length novels from what I can tell, so there's not going to be that much to explore from them, unfortunately, but that's how it goes. The next one I read was The Witches by Roald Dahl. This is a story about these witches that they eat children, or I guess they don't eat children, they like kidnap them and mess with them kind of thing. And the main character is this kid who gets into some trouble with the head witch, and they try and stop the witches from doing bad stuff again. And it was fine. I don't think I like Roald Dahl's writing that much. I've been trying to read/reread Roald Dahl's books in a collection that I got, and I wasn't too keen on this one. This one was a reread for me, and I remembered the concept, but I didn't remember too much about the plot, and it was fine. I don't know what to say about it. It's, I think I've outgrown maybe this kind of thing, and I don't know. I don't know if I'd love this as a kid either, so yeah, I don't have much to say. It's a pretty simple book anyway. I gave it a 2-star because it was... Then I read Legends of Localization, Book 1, The Legend of Zelda by Clyde Mandelin. This is a book that goes over the differences in translation between the Japanese and North American versions of the original Legend of Zelda game that was released on the Famicom in Japan and the NES in North America. He also goes over some differences with some newer versions, like it was re-released on digitally and I think on the GBA, and he goes over a few differences in there as well. And he just goes line by line throughout the whole game and talks about a few other differences with marketing and promotion and that kind of thing. And this was really, really interesting. I think if you're not interested in Japanese English localization, it might not be as interesting to you. I really liked it because I'm interested in Japanese, and I've tried to study Japanese before, and I'm really terrible at studying languages in general, so I haven't gotten super far into that. But it was just really interesting seeing what was changed, what was not, how things were localized for English audiences, because there are multiple ways of translating certain things and changing it to better suit English, because not everything translates very, very well and very cleanly. So there's definitely a lot of executive decisions that have to be made to get over that. And especially this is really interesting because the standards for localization were much lower back in the day, like 90s or 80s, or I don't know when the first Legend of Zelda came out. It doesn't say on the back, but back then there was definitely like, it's just for kids and whatever, they don't care. So yeah, I give this a 5-star. I think it was really, really interesting, well written, and there's one other Legend of Localization book, and I can't wait to get to that as well. It is a lot beefier though, so yeah. I will say though, I don't think you necessarily need to have played the original Legend of Zelda to enjoy this. I have only played a little bit, but and like I still really enjoyed this, but I think you have to be interested in video games and localization language in general, because I don't think this would be particularly interesting as just like a outside perspective, I guess. If you're not at all interested in how the localization, like translation type stuff, then this won't convince you, I think. This doesn't go into history or anything like that. It's just a lot of line by line type stuff. But for me, it was really cool. Then I did a reread of Elyria by Garth Nix. This is the second book in the Abhorsen series, and it follows the main character, Elyria. She, and then it follows another guy that's like a prince or something like that. I don't remember his name. And Elyria is part of the Claire. For a good chunk of this book, she's learning how to find her place in the Claire and outside of that. And then there's this whole big bad stuff going on behind the scenes as well. And both her and the prince guy, like Sam, maybe, I don't know. They eventually they both have to do stuff to stop the big bad, I guess. This is, so technically this is the second book in the series, but you can read this one first if you like. Personally, I would read Sabriel first, which was the first published one in the series, because there's some characters that reappear in here, and I don't know, I think it'd be more interesting if you knew those characters before. I think it'd be kind of weird in the scenes that they appear if you don't know who they are, but that's just my opinion. And I really like this. It does take a long time to get going, because there's a lot of parts of Elyria, like, I don't feel like I belong here, because the Claire is a group that can see into the future, and Lyriel is the only one who can't. But it is interesting, even though it is slow. I don't mind that. It does pick up maybe halfway or so, but it does end on a cliffhanger, so I didn't remember that it did that. So if you don't like cliffhangers, then I suggest moving on to Abhorsen right away, which is the third book in the series, and hopefully I get to that one soon. That one will also be a reread for me, but I have no idea what happens in that one. I don't remember it all. But regardless, I still really, really like this. I gave it, what did I give it? I gave it a 4-star. I think the parts with the Sam guy, the prince, were less interesting to me, I think, just because he wasn't so much a whiner, but he was pretty indecisive and had less guts than Lyriel, I'd say. And so I was like, yeah, Lyriel gets stuff done, and Sam less so. Sam is not quite smart either, I think, compared to Lyriel. So his parts were a little less interesting, but they weren't bad, just less interesting. So either way, still looking forward to Abhorsen, and I still really like this. The next one I read was also a reread, and that is The People of Sparks by Jean Duprow. This is the second book in the City of Ember series. I don't want to go too in depth about this one because it does get spoilery, but the first book, they are in this city that's kind of dying. The lights keep flickering out, they're losing electricity, they're losing food, and the two main characters, who are these kids, try to see if they can find a new town, because they're kind of secluded from everything else, and try and find more rations and stuff like that. And they discover the history of their town, which is called Ember. And this continues with that after the events of the first one. And this was very, very good. I sort of remembered what happened, but not a whole lot as well. And I didn't... There are some themes in here that I wasn't expecting, and I don't think I caught the depth of them the first time I read these, because I read this as a kid. Like, there's themes of, like, what are the... like, refugees, and how much do you give up? Like, what's fair for you versus, like, helping other people? Like, how much do you want to, like, save for yourself and help, like, keep yourself good versus, like, how much obligation do you have to have for other people in need? And I think this was a good exploration on that for, like, a middle grade type thing, that without being too preachy, I think. And you kind of have to make the conclusions yourself. It's not like it tells you that don't be bad to people kind of thing. And it is definitely a little bit more of a gray, there's not really a huge right or wrong thing to that issue, because it is a pretty complicated issue. And so that made me just, like, love it even more. The main characters are a little bit dumb in this one compared to the first one, I think, But it wasn't like so bad that it bothered me that much. It was just like I felt like they were making a few dumb decisions that they could have avoided. But I mean, they're kids, so I give them a little bit of leeway on that. But it's just like I wish they were a little bit smarter, but whatever. I still really enjoyed this, and I gave it a 5-star because it was really, really good. I liked it more than the first one, I think. But the first one was also really, really good too. This series I feel like is pretty underrated though, so if you like middle grade, I really suggest checking these out. There's only 4 books, and I think I'll try to read the next 2 soonish, depending on if I get through my current books or not. The next one I read was The Unadulterated Cat by Terry Pratchett. This one I read for the U letter in the A to Z challenge. The U was something I had trouble with and didn't really have much in my TBR, so I had to just find this online, borrow it or whatever. That was fine. It was it's not something I heard of by Terry Pratchett before, looking around for titles that started with U. And I mean, it was fine. It had some funny parts about cats. Like it's just talking about cats. What makes an unadulterated cat versus like a not real cat. And there were actually some bits that were kind of funny. And there are a lot of bits that just like is common jokes to hear about cats kind of thing. So it was fine. It wasn't bad. So I gave it a 3-star. It's not that complicated, so there's not really that much to talk about. It's just making funny jokes and observations about cats, and it's pretty typical, I feel like, Terry Pratchett humor, although I don't think it's as good as the Discworld books that I've read by him. I think he does a better job in those. But the next one I read was The Irregular at Magic High School, Volume 1 by Tsutomu Sato. This is the start of a series where magic is really common and people use these gadgets mainly to do magic. What are they called? I don't really know what they're called. CADs, I think they're called CADs. And it's kind of almost like programming in a sense. They talk about loops and variables, and like they almost have to write it in their head or something. It's a pretty complicated magic system, I feel like. And this one just goes in the introduction of the 2 main characters, and they go to this new school, and it does a lot of explaining about the magic system. And yeah, this is a pretty short light novel, and this ends on a cliffhanger too. I didn't realize that it would do that, but I now figured out why it says like part 1 in the title, enrollment arc 1, because there's an enrollment arc 2. So when I continue next time, I'll know that. But for this, it just kind of cliffhanger, like, oh, okay. Anyway, I had trouble understanding a lot of the stuff they were talking about, but it was less difficult than it could have been because I watched the anime, so I know a little bit about it. But it was pretty complicated and pretty information dense for the size. But I think since it's done that already, there might be more info, but it's done the basics at least. It won't have to explain that again. So I'm thinking I'll like subsequent volumes a little bit more. I give this a 3-star. Because I did like a lot of the action scenes. Like, if you like a badass main character that kicks some butt, this is definitely that. And the magic system is really interesting, but it is definitely complicated. I will continue for a little bit and see how it goes. But hopefully it tones down on the complicated garble, because that's a little bit hard for me to process. The next one I read was Gathering Blue by Louis Lowry. This is the 2nd book in the Giver Quartet. I don't actually know if this is a reread or not. It kind of felt familiar, but at the same time, I honestly don't know. So I may have read this a long time ago, but I don't really remember. This is a story about this girl. She has a twisted leg, like a deformed leg that she was born with. and it makes it really hard for her to live in this society where, you know, you have to work the fields and stuff, and if you can't do that, then we're gonna feed you to the demon-y people or something like that. But she is really good at embroidering. I was gonna say she's probably good at weaving too, but she's really good with textiles, and she gets picked up by somebody to work on this really fancy task, this really big task. As she's doing that, she learns more about the society and whether it's like wrong or right, and doesn't get much further than that. This is a pretty short volume, and if you read The Giver, I think The Giver is a better solo experience. I think this was interesting, but it doesn't reach as many conclusions as The Giver does. I think some things will be answered later in the last one. I think it's called The Sun, but as it is here, it kind of ends a little bit on a cliffhanger. But I did find the textile stuff kind of interesting, and I thought the main character was interesting as well, and her plight and like, ooh, how's the society work and that kind of thing. So I did still enjoy it. Not as much as The Giver. I gave it a 4-star, but I'd recommend reading it, honestly. I think it was interesting. We'll see how I feel about the 3rd and 4th book in the series, which I definitely have not read before. So maybe this will be not very good. I don't know. Then I read Finland Saga Book 4 by Makoto Yukimura. This is a epic Viking saga mostly following this kid that wants to seek revenge, and it gets into this war type thing and sort of politicky type stuff, lots of battles, lots of fighting, drama. So I can't really go too much into this. This is book 4, and they're pretty thick, so a lot of stuff happens. And this is a particularly exciting volume. A lot of stuff happens in here. Some pretty big, I don't know, twists is the right word, but plot points, I guess. Like pretty big jumps and like, whoa, that happened. I guess maybe twist is the right word, sort of. And ooh, this was really good. I wish I had more volumes so I can continue right away, but I'll have to order more at some point. This is a very good manga series, and I think a lot of people really enjoy this if you already read manga. So yeah, I gave this a 5-star because it was so good. I just wish I had more to read. The next one I read was The Lost World by Michael Crichton. I still haven't looked it up yet. I need to do that. This is the 2nd book in the Jurassic Park duology. I don't know if it's called that or not, but this, I'm sure people know what Jurassic Park's about, but this is kind of after the events of that, and they're supposed to have gotten rid of the dinosaurs, but some strange bodies are turning up in a different island, so a group goes off to investigate that, and shenanigans kind of thing. Can't go too much more into that, but a lot of people don't like this as much as the first one, but honestly, I like it maybe about the same. Jurassic Park and The Lost World are 2 very different books. Jurassic Park is more of a thriller first, with a lot of sciencey bit, and I feel like this is more of a let's study dinosaurs, but there's also a bit of thriller and of course science as well. I didn't like how this didn't have a lot of computer programming, but that's just a me thing. I really like programming. So I really liked actually them studying dinosaurs and what's going on, and they're talking about their behaviors and stuff like that. But I like dinosaurs, so I like kind of sciencey bit. So if you liked Jurassic Park for how action-packed it was, you probably won't like this as much, especially if you were bogged down by how much science there was in the first one. This one has a lot of science in it as well, maybe a bit more, but I still really enjoyed this. There is also a thing that happens right in the beginning that might bother some people, but it is a spoiler for the first one, especially if you have only watch the movie, then it'll be you won't be expecting it in the book, so I don't want to go into it. But some people are bothered by what happens here, kind of undoes something that happens in the first one. But it was kind of minor to me, so I didn't mind. I'm really glad I read this because, I really love this so much. I definitely want to read more Christian. First, gotta learn how to say his last name. You know, one thing I also really liked about this was them talking about technology as well, because this was written in the 90s, I think. I think it was 90s. Don't quote me on that if it's wrong. You can quote me on it if it's right. Where is the copyright information? Yeah, this was written in 1995, so quite old technology in here. And there's one part, it's not a spoiler, they talk about how they built this really crazy satellite phone with CIA technology, and it's only a pound. Like, it only weighs a pound. And like, satellite phones are different than cell phones. So they are pretty high-tech-ish now, but a modern satellite phone is not that much more heavy than a cell phone. It's definitely not a pound. And in here, there's like, normally they'd be the size of a suitcase, but this one, it's handheld. It lasts like 3 minutes. Wow. So it was kind of funny seeing how technology has changed since then. That's kind of a minor part of the story, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. There wasn't really anything I didn't like about this. It was a slow to start as well, but I mean, the first one was also kind of slow to start, honestly. The kids are less annoying, so that was a big bonus here too. So I'm like, yay. So I gave this a 5-star. So both the first one and this I gave 5-star because I love them a lot. Then I read the BFG by Roald Dahl. This is a book about this giant. Yeah, giant. I was gonna say giant, but he's giant. And he, and the main character sees him going through the night, and he kind of snatches her away because, she saw me, and this is the big friendly giant. And he gives dreams to people, and there's all these nasty giants, and they're gonna eat people, so they gotta try and stop. It's a pretty simple plot, and premise. It was a bit more enjoyable to me than The Witches, I guess, because I don't know, it was still pretty silly, a little too silly maybe for me, but it was fine. I gave it a 3-star. The giant talks kind of weird, so it's not very interesting to me, that, but it was kind of, but I did enjoy the premise a little more, I think, and what they were doing a little bit more, but it was still okay. I'm not sure I like Roald Dahl that much now, but there's a few more that I want to try of his that I own, so I'll reserve my final judgment for when I finish all of those. I might do a video where I go over each of the ones that I have and have read and rank them, perhaps, but I'll have to wait until I finish them. The next book I read was Castle in the Air by Diana Wynne Jones. It's not really a sequel. It says it's a companion to Howl's Moving Castle, but it's listed as the second book in the Howl's Moving Castle series. This follows a guy named Abudallah, and he gets a magic carpet, and he finds this princess that he falls in love with, but she gets kidnapped. So he has to go on this big old adventure to try and save her. It's a very whimsical, fairy tale-esque story. Not too dissimilar from the first book, honestly. Although this is more of an Arabian Nights-y type feeling, because I don't, it's in a made-up country, so I don't know what the name of it is, really, but, it's definitely feeling more Middle East-y. I don't know what you call that area for that, but I found it pretty interesting. Maybe the main character wasn't as interesting, like, He did have some witty parts, but I don't think I liked him as much as Sophie in Howl's Moving Castle, but maybe that might just because I've watched the movie for the Howl's Moving Castle, and there's no movie adaptation as far as I know of for this, so can't have watched it if it doesn't exist. But I still enjoyed this. I gave it a 4-star. A lot of people don't like this as much. I definitely like Howl's Moving Castle more than this, but I still really enjoyed this. Some people really didn't like the main character and thought he was really annoying. But I don't know, it just kind of felt like he was talking like he would in that area anyway, so I don't know, I didn't find him that bad. It was a little bit less direction to me than the first one, but it didn't bother me quite so much as well, because it kind of felt fairy tale-esque, and fairy tales don't really tend to have a whole lot of direction. I don't know, I still really enjoyed this. Not quite as much as Howl's Moving Castle, but I do recommend checking this out if you really like Diane Wayne Jones's writing / the first book. The final book that I have to talk about that I've read recently is Overlord Volume 6 by Kugane Maruyama. This is the 6 volumes in the series, so it's kind of hard to get too in-depth on this particular volume, but the series is about this guy who gets not reincarnated, but he gets turned into his avatar in this game. So he's this like skeleton lord type thing, and he's learning about how this game, it used to be game, now it's a real world, works, and he kind of goes around trying to conquer everything. It's a kind of darker-ish light novel series, but it's also kind of fun to root for the bad guys in this sense. They're almost less bad than some of the other people in there, so it's kind of a romp a little bit. A lot of like characters are like, oh, you can't beat me, and then they get punched in the face in one shot and like explosions. So it is definitely a breezy, light read is the wrong word because it does get pretty gory, I think, and dark, but it's not very deep though, I'd say. It is very interesting though, and I really like this volume too. There's a lot of cool fight scenes, but I suggest reading 5 and 6 one after the other, because I had a big break in between 5 and 6, and they take place like right after the other. There's a lot of events that kind of joined between them, and I was a little bit like, what happened in the last volume? I'm not really sure. So I suggest reading them back to back if you do get this far and enjoy the series. Yeah, and I gave this a 5-star. I really like that. Okay, that's all that I have to update on for books that I read so far in November. I'll do another update for hopefully a weekly update instead of everything all at once kind of thing going forward, or at least bi-weekly instead of like 3 weeks, because that was quite lengthy. Anyway, let me know if you read any of these and your thoughts on them, because I'd like to know. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in another video. Bye!